You're listening to the Closers Club's PodSpecs. Today we're talking to Christopher Marr, co-founder of Australian active care platform Sonder, about their exciting expansion into the UK market.
Hi, my name's Ryan Donaghy. I'm the founder of the Closers Club and this is PodSpecs. Today I'm joined by Christopher Marr of Sonder. He is a co-founder. Hi Chris.
G'day Ryan, how are you?
Yeah, really good. So look, for those who don't know Sonder, tell us about the business. Who are you?
I think like most organisations, it starts with a founding story. And by way of sort of potted history, came together with two very close friends, Pete and Craig, about 7 years ago with a grand ambition. It was to get help by someone's side anywhere on earth in less than 20 minutes. Perfect. Grand ambition, recognised, and probably in hindsight a little bit naive. We made the number one and most fundamental mistake of a startup. Because if you read any piece of entrepreneurial literature, it says generally very clearly, often it's underlined, bold, italicized, arrows pointing, neon signs flashing. Do not start with a solution, you go searching for a problem.
Perfect.
But alas, we did. So we set off with this ambition to have help by someone's side. We accessed ex and off-duty police and ambulance officers in order to solve a problem set that we saw in the personal safety space. After a bunch of years doing this and a lot of success, chiefly in Australia and New Zealand, with partners the likes of Allianz, the global insurance company, helping hundreds of thousands of people, we came across some really important insights which drove a fundamental change to the business model, a pivot, as you were.
So with that, after identifying that, what exactly was the problem and what is the solution?
The solution's probably a little less important because what we recognise is the landscape is evolving really, really quickly. So it's not good enough just to have a solution to a problem that is static. It needs to evolve, and that's precisely the journey we're on. But to talk, Ryan, on the first part of your question to the problem, what we realised was, notwithstanding we'd built a business model around personal safety, when we took a moment of pause to look at the data, why hundreds of thousands of people were coming to us under the auspices of help, we recognised for about 65% of the time, the primary presenting issue was mental health.
Wow.
If we took the moment to scratch below the surface of that mental health, we realised that about 55% of the time, it's conflated with physical health challenges or nutrition or poor sleep patterns or personal safety. The raw utilisation for personal safety, our early hypothesis was only about 5%. So that was sort of fundamental mistake number one, that we built this business with a solution in mind about what we wanted to do, and our hypothesis was wrong. Happily, we learned pretty quickly, reorientated the business and became the healthcare company that we are today. Perfect.
So personal safety to healthcare, how do you knit that together and what's the story now?
Well, it's an interesting point because when we formed that early hypothesis about help by your side, we thought help would be personal safety related, but typically at thresholds below that of the emergency services. That operated under the knowledge, not our knowledge, but knowledge borrowed from very, very clever people, that about 63% of the time that an ambulance is called or that someone turns up to A&E, it was treatable at lower cost. Okay. Most of the time that the police are called to an emergency, it can be dealt with at lower thresholds. So we wanted to provide this scalable response for those sorts of issues. But the correlation with healthcare was a really interesting one because when we designed this business to provide help to people and then 65% of the primary presenting issues with mental health, it drew us to a really curious question. Why? Why are we a business that's positioned ourselves as a safety-related business? Why are people coming to us with mental health challenges? And the answer came from one of our soon-to-be medical directors, as in soon-to-be in past tense, soon-to-be medical directors, Jamie Phillips, who said, fellas, it's a pretty simple outcome, really. This is all about Maslow's hierarchy. By providing that foundational aspect in psychosocial safety, by providing a safe place for people to engage with Sonder, to build trust, they will naturally come to you with higher order needs over time. So the foundational aspect was safety generated the trust in the platform, in the business, in the service. The trust generated the engagement. The engagement saw trust reinforced, this virtuous cycle, and then that saw people coming to us with higher order needs all the way up to really complex mental health requirements. When we noticed that change, we noticed that shift in dynamic, it was important for us not to be this myopic business about safety. It really behoved us to broaden the aperture of support, to have a multidisciplined approach, because we didn't want to be yet another point solution lining up on the point of crisis.
Yeah.
If we were going to provide real and meaningful impact at a time that was relevant and meaningful for an individual, we had to sort of cover the broad spectrum of health, and that's exactly what the model has us doing today.
Perfect. And with that as well, with the market opportunity, why do you feel, one, there is such a need for a complete solution provider, and how is there a gap in that as well for your customers?
Well, our view now, after sort of operating this market for about 7 years, is that the landscape for care, certainly within enterprises, within businesses, is overwhelmingly complex, burdensome. It's full of point solutions. Often these point solutions are wonderful, like high fidelity services, doing a really wonderful thing, but they're only tackling this myopic aspect, this tiny aspect of care. And we know through our data, over the course of hundreds of thousands of support cases and hundreds of thousands of members, that issues don't exist in isolation. They're complex. In fact, our most recent data suggests that 78% of challenges that people face have at least 2 complex issues. Now, if you're a point solution provider that deals with just a tiny aspect of this, like let's say you're a traditional EAP and your business model is selling psychology hours, no doubt that's part of a complex care plan. But it might not be everything. But if your business model is about selling this one thing, it's a bit like the hammer and the nail metaphor, that you're going to see everything as a nail and you're going to try and hit it with your hammer. The approach we're taking is much broader than that. It's a holistic in the true sense of the word. Without getting into the details, we can, if you like, later. We use an Indigenous healthcare model from the Maori, from New Zealand, a Maori Indigenous healthcare model called Te Whare Tapa Whā. But the point of that is it looks at everyone's issues holistically, and then we bring to bear the different services that are going to be relevant, unique, and meaningful for you as an individual.
Perfect, and that's what I loved about you guys. There's so many one-point solutions out there, and it's clearly not. What I'm also curious is the adoption from staff. What's been the intake, the usage, the success stories? Because the adoption has to be there.
Yeah, so that's crucial, isn't it? I mean, there's this old, sort of saying, the butterfly flaps its wings over here, the tornado, a cyclone over this side, depending on which hemisphere we're in. Butterfly and tornado. And what's the causal aspect here? What's the cause and effect? What correlates? When this happens, what happens over here? And in this landscape, it's really difficult to attribute. It is. We've done a huge amount of work with major customers, like global supermarket retailers with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of staff, all the way through to McDonald's, the global brand, in supporting their people. And we've actually now have real data that talks about the impact on engagement, productivity, absenteeism, employee churn, engagement, productivity, these sorts of things, which is wonderful. And we can be helpful to get.
I was going to say it'd be great to hear some of that.
But aside from all of those things, often organisations, leaders, chief people officers, CEOs, they look at utilisation as a proxy for value. I mean, it's
an ROI market.
Of course it is. And we've got the detail that dives into the ROI. But at the end of the day, we need a simple metric that shows actually what impact we're having. And for us, it's utilisation. We sit with a utilisation metric that sits between 10 and 20 times the utilisation of these legacy point solutions like EAP. So it sits for us at about 42.7% if we were getting really specific, but just a little over 40%. Some organisations who have really clear internal marketing channels and engaged staff and really exposed and strong leadership can generate that up to something in the order of 80% often. For much larger organisations like the supermarkets, it's a little bit under that, but the median sits at 42%. And I think that sits against sort of comparables in the point solution space of between 2 and 4%. So it's huge outcome.
What do you put that adoption down to? The usability, the fact of the current market? Why is that adoption rate so high?
Ryan, in a simple word, it's about trust. We came across that. I think we're a really credible team. We've got outstanding humans, that bring this service to life, this product to life. But ultimately, aside from that, that's sort of hidden behind the brand of the business. And so the brand really has to resonate for people, and people are sharing some of the most challenging aspects of their life, really. And therefore, trust is fundamental to the engagement. If we can generate trust, if we can do what we say we're going to do, and we do, we've never missed an SLA, we've always performed, we've never had a customer churn, as examples over 7 years.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
But this is a marker of trust. At the member level, when someone engages with us once, we know that they're going to come back, because the net promoter score is something in the order of the high 90s. Customer satisfaction up in the same sort of metrics. And this is fundamental. When we think about how do we develop that trust, because it's one thing to say, hey, trust is the answer, but how do you actually deliver that trust? It comes back to that early part of the business model, which was about safety. Looking after people's safety at times that really count, being there, supporting at a time that matters, a time that's meaningful, a time that's relevant in their journey. We call it active care. Yeah. We can jump into that as well in a moment. But when we do that, and we deliver, we do what we say we're going to do, it forces the re-engagement. The re-engagement, because it's relevant and meaningful and unique to you as an individual, sees you wanting to come back because we're having impact at the end of the day. And as we go through that journey with a member, and as we deliver, it builds more and more trust. It's that virtuous cycle that we spoke about a little earlier. And that sees us dealing with higher order needs for individuals, again, delivering the outcomes, and ultimately they tell their friends and their colleagues.
And can you expand on that active care? Because that's what I thought. It's active, it's proactive, it's not letting things escalate. Can you explain what that means and how it's incorporated into the solution?
It took us a while to get to those words, active care, because they're words that risk being a little esoteric. They could just mean anything to anyone. When we think about what help means, what care means, our view is it's not good enough to stand on the line of crisis and be there with your hand in the air saying, come to me if you need help. Yeah. We need to be earlier in that person's journey. We need to be focused on building early intervention pathways. We need to be focused on building help-seeking behaviour. If you think about the way you consume anything in your life, whether it's Netflix, whether it's calling an Uber, whether it's how you book a holiday, it's on your time, your agenda. It's in those moments that you have the ability between, looking after kids or chatting to your colleagues or doing work calls or emails. It's these little moments between where you get to engage, probably not with Netflix, and, hopefully that's not on work time, but it's these little moments that's at your time when you get to control the outcomes and you're being empowered. And that's what those businesses are doing. It hadn't ever been done in healthcare before. And that's precisely what we're doing. So active care is about empowering an individual to take control of their journey. We give them the tools. We use clinical models to help people go through a stepped care process, which we can talk about. It's a clinical health model. But we help people, we empower people to go through that journey so that they can engage at a time that's relevant for them, in a way that's relevant for them, to get results that are relevant for them.
I think that's so important, because in today's world, if there's any way to delay something, we will, and that active instant solution just allows us to stay on top of it. So I think that's superb. And we spoke about it from an employee point of view, but from an organisation point of view, as a founder, as a leader, how will this impact the way that they look after and manage their teams, and what's the data and the behind the scenes aspect that they'll get with this?
Sonder ultimately is about building high performance teams. Now, everyone says they do that. If you look at the background of our founding teams and the staff that we have in the business, they are all from high performance backgrounds. Pete and I are both special forces officers in Australia who have served multiple tours overseas in war. Craig was a corporate lawyer at the highest level, and then a diplomat with the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs. That is just the tip of the iceberg when we think about the type of performance that is expected inside the business. We've got people that come from Google and Atlassian and Canva and world-class organisations that are each bringing a little perspective about how to drive performance. And what we do is we inculcate these concepts into the product. So the product becomes the aggregate of the culture of the company, ultimately. We're really proud of that. So how does it sort of impact a business, though, is your question. So we take that product which is being built with these extraordinary people. And then we need to make it relevant and meaningful, not just for a member, but of course to generate ROI and impact and reduce burden for organisations. Now, we talk about productivity engagements, reduction of churn, reduction of absenteeism, etc. But at the end of the day, this is about how do we help an organisation have thriving people? If we can help people quickly at a time of their choosing, empower them to be engaged with their own healthcare journey, then they're going to bring their best selves to work, and we see that every day. To give you some real examples, our partnership with McDonald's, which we spoke about a little earlier, we demonstrated with McDonald's a 6% reduction in absenteeism. Wow. We demonstrated a 7% reduction in churn. And if you think about the size of that organisation of 130,000 staff in Australia, having a 6% reduction on absenteeism and 7% on churn actually is real dollars. Now, it's a bit harder for us to measure how many extra burgers get sold by virtue of Sonder. So you can appreciate this is the butterfly and the tornado effect. We don't quite have the lens on that. But those things alone are driving incredible outcomes. And it's also the ability for organisations to deprecate underutilised services. Again, it's not to suggest that these services aren't excellent in their own right. Most likely they are. But they're only addressing just a small portion of the problem and therefore not addressing the business issue that manifests inside these organisations.
Yeah, and to expand on that, we're saying active care. Does it allow businesses to make active change? Does it give them such a better understanding of the landscape and obviously mood, energy levels, mental state of their well-being, of their staff force?
Yeah, it's a really thoughtful question, Ryan. We've not spoken about the product yet, and in fact that's probably a really good thing, because the product will evolve, as we spoke about right at the start. But one really important part of the product which you've touched on there, the data and insights. Now, we're a clinical company, so the records sit within a clinical electronic health record, so they meet all the data and privacy requirements, GDPR of course for this jurisdiction, ISO 27001 for any of the sort of interested geeks out there, etc. So data is personal, it's anonymous, it is completely confidential. But what we are able to do is aggregate our knowledge in an anonymised way, so that we can understand the trends, we can understand the causal factors between what does workplace harassment in an organisation, what does it mean? What are the flow-on effects here? What does that mean for sleep performance? What does that mean for the nutrition outcomes? What does that mean for your performance at work? How do we drive understanding so that we can empower organisations, leaders, to make decisions? And a good example is for large portions of the employed workforce now, we're able to see, if we see lead indicators, we can see what might be suggestive that there's an over-indexation of workplace harassment. Not that any of that would be acceptable, but there's baselines for all these different metrics. What if we see a little spike in that? Maybe we can now see that as a lead indicator for lost time injury frequency rates increasing, or stress leave, or absenteeism increasing, or staff churn. And if we can nip that in the bud, if we can inform an organisation that there are these lead indicators, it enables them to take action. And the most sophisticated leaders that we're seeing across the world are adopting this approach. And I think Sonder is unique in our ability to deliver this. I use the word really deliberately, unique, because we operate across the entire spectrum of healthcare. Safety, medical, mental health. It actually goes much broader than that, but they're the three buckets that we really principally talk about. We're uniquely placed because we're the only business that operates across that entire spectrum to be able to see the causal factors and interrelationship between these aspects, and then the outcomes that we're seeing inside the workplaces.
Perfect, and it's so important, especially with remote work. We're no longer seeing our employees, we're no longer seeing the work environment. This gives us outside of that workplace, an insight into the mental state, physical state of our talent. And tell us, for those that want to visualize the product, what does it look like? What's the user journey like?
Simply put, Sonder is a single entry point for employee care. A single entry point for employee care. Those few words say a lot. There's a lot of complexity that sits behind. But if you think of it as this one-stop shop for healthcare, we put a person at the centre of the care model, and then we bring services to the person so that that experience is seamless for them. That drives the engagement, that drives the outcome, and that drives the productivity, engagement, and reduction of churn effect for businesses. How do we bring that together? I like to think of it in 4 components or 4 pillars.
Okay.
Up front, we have the app. Like any other app, it's digital. It's available, of course, on Android and iOS. So we have the app. So think about this as a digital interface that focuses on building help-seeking behaviour and early intervention pathways, principally. How do we do that? When someone downloads the tech, they go through an onboarding process. It invites an individual to conduct one of several, or a few of several, clinical assessments. That could be for well-being, for your clinical depression, mental health, anxiety, your sleep quality with cognitive behavioural therapy, these sorts of assessments. That gives us a bit of a baseline.
Yeah.
That baseline will evolve because you will evolve and our knowledge of you will evolve depending on how much you want to share with us, and that's completely up to you. Again, recognising all the data is kept in a clinical record. So when we do that, that helps build a persona. Now, the persona management is really sophisticated, such that yours will look quite different to mine, even though we're sort of, we might even fit in a very similar demographic. I'm probably a bit older than you, Ryan. But
definitely taller.
So we probably, for a lot of sort of demographics or personas, we'd sort of look the same. But at Sonder, we look very, very different. And actually, that goes to one of the fundamental elements of the company is our name, the realisation that every person lives a life as vivid and complex as your own. We might look similar, but actually we're fundamentally different people, we're fundamentally different personas, we have fundamentally different needs. So that's what the persona management recognises. So when you go through those assessments, not only do you get that assessment for yourself, but it helps inform how do we engage with you as an individual to build engagement. That engagement drives trust because it's relevant and meaningful for you, but it also means that the content that's being pushed to you is relevant and you're going more likely to engage with it. That's going to drive the early intervention and help seeking behaviour outcome, which is the bottom level of the step care model. But maybe I won't go into that detail now. Perhaps you can ask me another question about that in a few minutes. So with that early intervention help seeking behaviour components, this is the facilitated self-care. But the app is also a mechanism to reach out to pillar number 2, which is our operations centre. Yeah. The operations centre, there are 3 globally, one in Sydney, Australia, one in Auckland, New Zealand, and one in London, in the UK, just in the vicinity of Victoria. These facilities operate 24/7. Doctors, nurses, psychologists, and support coordinators to deal with your every need. What that facility is doing, and it's a very, very impressive thing, sort of a NASA operations room, very, very cool to see. If you're interested, you can look on our website. But inside this facility, we're triaging. And we know, by virtue of the data for hundreds of thousands of people, that about 80% of the time it's a complex need. So it's not about sort of responding to a request and trying to solve it in 15 seconds. In fact, on that, the average case time that we're helping someone, on average, is 4 hours and 52 minutes. The longest case last quarter, I think, was 62 days, to give you some perspective. So this is not sort of fast food service. This is thoughtful, considered support, because that's what's relevant for you. So those doctors, nurses, psychologists, support coordinators, they are building a bespoke care plan. They're triaging, they're understanding your needs, and they are building a bespoke care plan. When they build that plan, it goes into pillar number 3, seamless to you as an individual or as a member, but for Sonder, the product level, it goes into pillar number 3, which are our care pathways. This could be our responder network. Spoke earlier on about help by your side very, very quickly.
That human
27 minutes in Australia is our average time to get help to someone. We haven't yet stood up that capability in the UK, but coming in July. It could be our clinical pathway. It could be our subclinical pathways. So think therapists, think counsellors, think coaches, think support coordinators, people to help you with safety related issues. So it could be clinical support. Clinical support includes our A&E nurses. These people have got a minimum of 7 years emergency room experience. They've often had careers, long-standing careers prior to that. Empathetic, dealt with a myriad of issues as you might expect. Thoughtful, contemplative, aligned with our culture and values. So they're people that are curious, they want to listen, they want you to engage, and they want to develop an outcome that's right for you. All of those nurses are supported by our medical directors. So this provides the clinical governance framework around the provision of advice. Our psychology capability, which is both in-house and external to guarantee supply. We make sure that we're able to support high order needs immediately. If there's a need that's a little bit longer term, then we're able to put that into a referral network where we control the SLAs, we control the experience, we control the service that gets delivered on Sonder's behalf for an individual. Feels completely seamless, which is the point. So that's the care pathways. And pillar number 4 is, as we spoke about before, is the data and insights.
Perfect, no, superb. So good that it's an ongoing solution. There's so many options out there where it's get in, get out. This is proactive and then a long-term solution. So that's great to hear. And we've talked about the why, we've talked about the solution, we've talked about the product. Give me a little bit about the business today at Sonder. What's it achieved? What's it want to achieve? What's the plans for the UK?
Ryan, we set off 7 years ago with this huge ambition, which still exists. In fact, straight after this, I'm going back to meet with my co-founders to talk about how do we re-articulate our vision and values in light of this evolving circumstance.
Yeah.
Vision, they're generally set with about a 5-year horizon, and we're 7 years old, and it's about right for us to sort of be considering that. So we are. There'll be no fundamental changes, we know that. It's about how we articulate it. It's how we articulate it for the modern workforce. So where have we come from? We're a tiny little company, 3 founders with a big ambition. We've grown now to an organisation of almost 300 staff operating across Australia, New Zealand, and now the United Kingdom, very proudly. I'm very fortunate to be leading our expansion into the United Kingdom and leading and building the team over here. And that's a necessary step because our vision is global. About global access to on-demand and personalised safety, medical and mental health support. We've raised, of course, a business like us, we need capital. It's hugely capital intensive. What's really important is to be diligent with that. You need to be almost more diligent than it's when it's your money. In fact, certainly the case.
Yeah.
We've raised tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars or pounds worth of money. We're a formidable company in the sense that we have very, very strong balance sheet. We're funded by some of the most sophisticated and reputable funds in Australia and from around the world, including Blackbird, although I think that's probably a less relevant name here in the UK, but I think is the most significant venture capital company in Australia. Recently raised a $1 billion fund. So we're really fortunate to be part of their portfolio. And of course that gives us the backing to be able to take these ambitious steps into new markets, new jurisdictions. Once we launch and are successful in the UK, which is happening right now, we will make our entree into Western Europe and into the United States. It's super exciting times. We're ramping up for our Series C capital raising sort of mid next year, and Craig, my business partner and CEO, is over here doing capital raising discussions prematurely because we want to understand we've got this unique ability to sort of choose who's going to fund the company. We've got wonderful backers in Australia. We're looking for how we're going to continue that growth globally.
Superb. And look, it is such a great business, and what I want to learn a little bit more about the market reaction to it. You guys have won a number of awards. If you think about your achievements, what are you most proudest of to date?
It's certainly not the awards. The awards are really nice. It's great recognition, particularly for the team. I'm most proud of the people that we have in the company.
Yeah.
But to touch on the awards, because they're important and I think really relevant, because it's a hallmark. It's the external validation, which for some people is really important. We won Telstra Business of the Year in 2019. That was prior to our pivot. So we're particularly proud of that because that sort of recognised the impact that we'd made very early in the company's history, and now we've just grown into much more formidable business as a result of the change. But Telstra, for the audience that may not understand this, is the equivalent of maybe O2 or Vodafone or British Telecom. So it's the most significant telecommunications company in Australia, and they run, which is broadly and very widely acknowledged as the most significant business award in Australia, and we won the Australian Business of the Year, which we're very proud of. We were ranked in the top 10 for LinkedIn startups, and I think that recognises the quality of talent and the culture that exists within the business. We won the Australian Financial Review's most innovative technology company, the most innovative technology company. This is a hugely prestigious award. It's vied for by some of the most sophisticated and largest businesses in Australia. That's the equivalent of the Financial Times sort of business technology award. So of course we're very proud of that. But as I said at the start, Ryan, it's all about people. Like a business at the end of the day, that's all it is. It is just people that are coalescing around something that's bigger than themselves, a vision and a purpose and values that speak to them and are relevant and meaningful and make impact in the world. And I'm really proud of them.
And obviously, look, you've taken some people from amazing companies, but for those watching this that want to join Sonder, what are the non-negotiables? What makes a great Sonder member of talent? It's
an interesting question you pose there, Ryan, non-negotiables. The reality is that a business like ours is growing very rapidly, and the requirement for talent changes naturally. The culture that we develop, that we inculcate in the team, has to be driving towards a particular objective. The culture is a fundamental input to the capability that we need to deliver. So we need to be really clever and thoughtful about the culture that we want to cultivate to get to the objective. And that continues to change because the business scales. The people that thrive in the early phases of business are not necessarily the people that are able to take it from sort of 10 to 20, as an example. And that goes for everyone. It goes for founders as well. And I think there's this really important aspect about humility there. And we're a business that's gone through a really significant growth phase. We're now into a scaling phase, and we're doing that scaling in an international domain. So it's really complex. Market dynamics are complex. So we need really clever people. That's sort of fundamental number one. We need clever people. We need people that are motivated by something that's bigger than themselves. This is a team sport. That's the reality. And it's gritty and hard. And we shouldn't let the success of the business be a proxy for anything other than really hard work, dedication, commitment to a cause, and having fun. I mean, this is crucial because this is what drives the real outcomes that we want. And everyone that joins the business has to look like Sonder. What does that mean? It's a word I've used numerous times here. It's about trust. If the spidey senses on the back of your neck start to tingle, then they're probably not the right person. We're looking for grit. We're looking for resilience. We're looking for intellect. We're looking for people that are prepared to work hard, that are prepared to play hard, that commit to team, brilliant at the basics, and can really add something to the mixture. We're not looking to sort of clone ourselves. In fact, quite the opposite. We need diversity of thought. We need diversity of opinion. We need to be relevant and meaningful to a really broad set of dynamics and personas. And so we've got a pretty open mind about the people, but they need to be performers.
Perfect. And I always like to go back to why this mission? You're super talented guy, it's a very strong founding team. Why of all the business models out there was this what lit your fire?
The word service comes to mind. I spoke very briefly about the background of the three founders, and of course the business is so much bigger than us. I mean, we're almost irrelevant to the business now, if I'm honest. But the heart of the business, and your question was about why. Why do we get into this? And it is about service. You know, both Pete and I are full-time army officers for 20 years, including 10 years in as commanders in special forces. Craig, an illustrious and very talented career as a diplomat, and of course, in his spare time was an Army Reserve officer. But all those careers talk about service. It's about commitment to something that's bigger than you.
Yeah.
And everyone that we bring into the company has to be lit by that same spark. Now, that doesn't mean military service, and certainly not. I mean, that's sort of almost an irrelevant component of the company. It doesn't mean that you need to come from a background in first responding or service in the NHS or something like that. It's about your mindset. It's about team over self. It's about contributing to something that's bigger than you, being inspired by purpose, not just the words, but actually what gets you up out of bed in the morning. Like, are you someone willing to commit? Are you someone that wants to be part of a journey and make real impact in the world? And when I think about all those things combined, and therefore why Sonder, is because we came across this problem set that help is really crucial. It's not being delivered for people. We're seeing 42%, so says the Productivity Commission, 42% of people right now are going through some level of mental health condition. Now, that could be from suicidal ideation, the most extreme, through to waking up with anxiety every morning or having challenges with their partner and relationships. It could be colleagues or workplace harassment, or it could be just that pit of anxiety in your stomach because you want to perform. But whatever it is, we know that 42% of people are suffering from this. I don't want to draw a correlation there between that number and the 42% engagement that we have with our membership. I think that's coincidental. I really do. But part of me would like to sort of think that that's representative to some degree. So bringing that into some semblance of relevance for your question, Ryan, it's about where do we think as service people, where can we have impact? And this was a problem set that we figured we can make effect on, impact at broad scale, and help hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, by the time we achieve our vision.
And look, I know you want to help everyone, but for those listening as founders or decision makers, which companies need to be picking up the phone and speaking to you guys? Where have you had the most success? What is your ideal customer profile? And where do you feel you can add the most value?
Our strategy called for the very, very largest organisations. That was so that we could underwrite our infrastructure, underwrite our service, guarantee supply and demand, and all the things that make the unit economics work. So that saw us partner with Allianz, the global insurance company, Woolworths, which is brand and positioned a little like Marks and Spencer over here, but the size of Tesco, hundreds of thousands of staff. Coles, which is the other part of the Australian supermarket duopoly. Those two businesses together is sort of something in the order of sort of 400,000 people we support. McDonald's, we support the staff of Bupa. We support the staff of Department of Health, NRMA, Toll, retail stores. So big organisations, PwC, Commonwealth Bank, as examples. Many law firms, Ernst & Young, you name it. But as we've addressed that part of the market, the problem still exists. And all those names, and they're all big, wonderful names to have on the registered note, of course. But they only represent a tiny proportion of the workforce, is the truth. The major part of the workforce exists in commercial, mid-market and small and medium businesses. And we can treat it all. So our mission, now that we've been very successful at the top end of the market, is to make our service, our product available to the long tail, to the companies that have between 250 staff and 10,000 staff. But regularly, we're getting something. We typically work with small and medium business only when it's an inbound lead. We don't actively pursue that, but we don't turn people away. And to the point where this week we signed 2 customers with 25 staff. And we give them the benefit of the unit economics that we develop at scale. We give them the ability to have world-class service for a relevant and meaningful price. But you asked about ideal, and ideal in this market at the moment is between 1,000 and 5,000 staff for us.
Superb. And a little bit more granular about the UK, what is the plan for expansion there, and what kind of people do you want to be speaking to over the next 6, 12 months, etc.?
The UK every market has its nuance, of course. So it would be folly to say that Australia and the UK are the same. They're not the same. But there are very similar dynamics at play. Universal healthcare, Medicare in Australia, very similar to the NHS here in the UK. Culturally, I think there's a huge alignment, probably not during the Ashes over the summer. We might see a little bit more friction there. But the Ashes and Rugby World Cup aside, I think the cultures are very similar. I think the requirements and the demands of employees are really similar. And so the work that we've done in market, leveraging the expertise of CEOs across the land, chief people officers across the UK, the market dynamics seem quite similar. We have high expectation, high conviction that the product is relevant for the market. We're seeing that now in the sales outcomes just after sort of 6 weeks of sales activity on the ground, which we're very, very pleased about. And so the expansion plan is really to address
the need.
The need across this entire spectrum of workforce, from very, very large organisations like Marks and Spencer and Tesco and McDonald's certainly, all the way through to tiny companies because the employee needs are the same, ultimately, because we are each individuals. So whether you work for Tesco or you work for the Closers Club, you are at a fundamental level, your human needs are the same, and that's what Sonder addresses.
So clear, it's not about the commercials, it's not about the wins, it's about the impact and the help. It's such a clear value. Yeah,
I mean, the commercials, they look after themselves. Yeah. Our CFO precisely agreed with that comment, Ryan. But I think that's sort of true. I mean, you require really strict management, and the governance processes in our business are world class. And I don't mean that as saying that from my perspective as a founder. We've got non-executive directors who have served as CEO of LinkedIn as an example, who says that the governance and sophistication at a board level is something that he sees in ASX, Australian Stock Exchange, 200 companies, or perhaps even better than those. So the governance structures that we've implemented across the business, which shouldn't be a surprise, noting the backgrounds, because it's ultimately, in order to take risk, in order to grow and be bold, you need to have your house in order. And you have your house in order, it's about governance and frameworks and systems and processes, which we have, and we leverage those to really great effect. But ultimately, if we focus on impact at a product level, governance sort of elements aside, the commercials will work for themselves, and they tend to do that.
Perfect. And is there anything else you'd like to share? Anything with this opportunity that you think's important for the market to know?
Ryan, at a fundamental level, we want people that can generate impact. One thing's to talk, and we want people that can walk the walk. We want people that are driven by making impact. I don't just mean against the purpose and the vision of the company, but I'm talking about in role. How do you get into a role and make an impact? We want people that are prepared to deliver, and that's a fundamental requirement. There's a value exchange as an employee and as an employer. I think we're a really exciting place to work, with an exciting culture, a growing team, well-funded, doing meaningful work, having massive impact in the world. We've got a wonderful trajectory. So that's the offer from our point of view. And the request from us is that we have people that are motivated, committed, driven by making impact against the problem set, against the vision, against the purpose, but also against the role description. There's a rule in life that A's hire A's and B's hire C's and D's. Now, this is a convenient sort of comment for me to make, because by saying we're looking for the best is to suggest that I think I'm an A. And I probably do. And when I look around at my colleagues, they're certainly A's. And I'm this sort of oddball person in some respects that likes to wake up every morning with a pit of anxiety in my stomach. And that pit of anxiety exists because I know if I don't come to work with my A game, I'm going to get called out. I'm going to get called out by my partners. I'm going to get called out by my colleagues. I'm going to get called out by the brand new customer success manager who's 27 years old if I don't bring my A game. And I love that environment. Now, that has to and does exist within the context of our values, and the relevant one in this comment is respect. We need to respect each other, and we do. We need to respect the role that we each have and how to drive impact and commitment against that role. And that's important. That's what being a high performance team is. When we have the ability to walk in the morning and set ego aside, and I have an ego like anyone else. But if you really do believe that the purpose and the vision and what we're doing, the impact that we're making is more important, then it gives you this superpower where you can put that ego aside and you can look faithfully to your colleagues and your own performance, and you can be real. And that's a hugely empowering position to be in.
So Sonder's clearly changed. Tell us about the evolution to the problem for both employers and employees.
Our view on the problem has evolved naturally, because as we learn, we adapt our thinking.
Yeah.
What we're seeing now is that the care landscape within organisations is overwhelmingly complex, burdensome, hard to navigate, full of point solutions, and the point solutions are all underutilised, not solving the core business problems. It's not surprising, because we saw during COVID, and perhaps a little bit prior, all these individual services being generated to try and address a niche aspect of care. Wonderful services, no doubt. Many of them are. But we know from our data that about 80% of issues are complex. When we think about what complexity means in this context, it's about the interrelationship of problems. That anxiety doesn't exist on its own, it exists alongside not getting enough sleep or malnutrition and exercise and performance at work, relationship challenges. These things, they're inseparable. Your safety, your personal safety, your anxiety when you walk home late at night, these things are completely interrelated. And so point solutions that try and address but one aspect of the problem, by definition, aren't solving the core business problem, which is how to generate productive, motivated, engaged, thriving staff, high performance staff. So simply put, the problem is we've built this overwhelming landscape. We've called it an ecosystem. It's a haphazard build of all these different point solutions that aren't addressing core business problems. They're certainly not addressing core member problems.
Perfect. And people will know health, they'll know well-being. What exactly is safety? Why would someone use a safety solution?
Really thoughtful question, Ryan. Safety sits as the fundamental human need. This is Maslow's theory from whenever, a smart chap from some time ago. Sonder considers that as this fundamental human requirement, and therefore fundamental to your engagement with us. How do we deliver it? It's about giving you and empowering you to take control of your safety. We do that with a variety of different features, whether that's some of the, track my journey or safety notices or check on me's. Safety notice is a single example. During the coronation here recently, I got an alert on my phone from Sonder that said, hey, be aware that there's planned protests at Piccadilly or wherever it happened to be, which is prompting me to take action if that was something that was going to make me nervous. Or maybe it changes my plans for the day based on that understanding of the environment. It goes to much, much higher order needs. And an example of where Sonder made huge impact was during the Burke Street ramming incident in Melbourne, which was not dissimilar, sadly, to the London Bridge ramming from a few years ago here, when a criminal started driving through a crowd and murdered people. In that circumstance, we were able to alert 116 different people that came from 6 different organisations, and we responded 7 minutes ahead of the police response. And we did it through technology. We put a geofence around that particular part of the city after being notified by a different program that we have inside the business called Sonder Monitors, but a story for a different time. We geofence that location, sent an instant alert out to people that were affected, asking them to tell us if they were safe or not, so that we could take proactive action to go and help those people. And of course, report to the business that, hey, you've got staff in the area, but don't worry, they're all good.
And look, we're in a market where every bit of cost needs to be justified. There's loads of, like we said, one-point solutions, health, well-being, safety. What's the data behind it to show that the usage is there and the need is there for a complete solution?
We mentioned before that usage often is a proxy for value. On that metric, we're achieving between 10 and 20 times the outcomes of these legacy point solutions like EAP. To be specific about that number, our median across all our partners is 42.7% utilisation. So really, really high. EAPs typically sit between 2 and 4%. So that's number one. Our partnership with McDonald's generated a 6% reduction in absenteeism, massive impact on the bottom line, and that sat alongside a 7% reduction in churn. When you think about an organisation of the size of McDonald's, I mean, those numbers are real, they're meaningful, but they're also a bit of a proxy for any other organisation as well. We're able to measure that really clinically at such a significant volume of workforce. It's much harder to measure that accurately for smaller businesses, but the trend's the same, productivity and engagement, all these things combined generate between a 7 and 11 times financial return on investment every year. Our partnership with Woolworths is a great example of that coming into effect commercially. When we negotiated a contract with Woolworths, and this again is the business that's brand and positioned a little like Marks and Spencer, so it's a premium offering in Australia, but they're the 220,000 person workforce, a huge business operating across Australia and New Zealand. We initially executed a 4-year contract with Woolworths. Within 8 months of standing up that contract, we had achieved an outcome that was far in excess of the KPIs that we'd agreed on. And as a result of this, we renegotiated the contract to become a 7-year contract, which effectively doubled the total contract value. So think about a business like this, one of the most sophisticated businesses in the country, operating 24/7 international supply chains, keeping food in the pantries of Australians every single day, particularly during the pandemic, and this was during the pandemic. Across multiple business lines, they've got the metro stores, which is a bit like Tesco Express, through to the supermarkets and the supply chain business and the hotel business, etc. So across all those business lines, we're able to demonstrate such impact in the first 8 months of our partnership that a company the size and sophistication of Woolworths doubles our contract effectively.
Wow.
That's really powerful, and I think speaks to the impact that we're having.
And I'm right, I think you touched on this earlier, you've never churned a customer.
We've never churned a customer.
Wow.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It'll happen at some point.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
More economic rather than performance.
And so it's not to sort of stand on a plinth here and say, hey, we're perfect, because we're not. We're learning. That's the reality. And customers at some point will churn, and that's actually really healthy. It's important as a business that we're not over-servicing. If we don't have customers churning, then it means that we're over-servicing, or it means that we should be pushing our price higher. We should be taking advantage of the impact that we're generating, because we know that we're generating up to 11 times financial return on investment. And if we're going to achieve our vision, it's important that we get the economics right inside our business so that we can take that capital, that revenue, and fold it into our growth plans, because that's what enables us to continue to sustain the outcomes, and that ultimately will deliver better services to the members, and that's what's most important.
So I'm just trying to understand the business model, because it's such a support-focused business. How big is the commercial team from a percentage point of view across the support element of the business?
On the support side of the business, we use technology as the fundamental layer, which is developing and enhancing, and it's ensuring that when we're putting humans into the loop, on the product side, that they're having real and meaningful impact. So this is to make sure that where there's an opportunity for guided and curated care through the technology, that we're signposting, directing people so that they can take active control of their journey. Where it's necessary for them to speak to a therapist or a coach or a support coordinator or a nurse or perhaps a psychologist, then we want to deliver those services quickly,
perfect,
with high access and relevant. That means that as the business grows, we of course need to fold in more people on the services side. But we're a business at a fundamental level that is about achieving global impact. And to do that, we need a really astute commercial team. We need a marketing team that can make sure our brand is recognised as the impact player in the market. That we can inculcate trust, not just with the members, but with the organisations that we're selling to. And to that end, we're building a really big and strong commercial team. We have something in the order of 150 support staff in Australia, that people delivering services, and something in the order of or a similar number that are on the commercial side within the business. Here in the UK, our plan calls for a headcount over the next 12 to 18 months of something in the order of 87, about half of which will be commercial.
Big commercial growth, perfect. And just look, when there's a startup, when there's that growth, can you give any examples of people growing through the business and what that journey's looked like for them?
Absolutely. The person that comes to mind here naturally is a very good friend, and her name is Lindsay Melville.
Okay. Lindsay
was employee number 2. I'm going to also put a shout out to Harry as well, because he was employee number 1, but who immediately came to mind was Lindsay. Now, Lindsay had just finished her MBA at Australia's leading business school. She applied and was quickly selected for the first employee or the second employee at Sonder. In fact, she was the first full-time employee. I think Harry was a part-time employee. She applied and was quickly selected as our first employee. She had a wonderful credential. We couldn't afford to pay her properly back then. Times have changed.
Yeah.
We paid competitive and I think above market rates. But back then we couldn't afford it. It was really about committing to this sort of journey and the vision, the purpose and the values, and Lindsay certainly did that. Because we couldn't pay her properly, my family offered to put her up in our house.
Oh, wow.
In order to offset her rent. So she was living in the granny flat of my house in Sydney alongside a newborn bub. Lindsay, at that point, was working as you need to in the early stages of a startup across all aspects of the company. But principally, she was running member support, what we now call member support. Back then, we were calling it operations, and she was doing a superb job. And as is true in life, when you find extraordinary people, grip them really tight and never let them go, and that's certainly been the case for Linz. Linz then moved into the commercial side of the business, working as really my right-hand person for many, many years. We came and did the early phases of the market entry into the UK together. Happily, we'd started to pay her properly. She could get her own pad.
She's moved out,
which is good, yeah. But to maintain that familial link, my wife and I invited Lindsay to be the godmother to our second-born child. So this extraordinary friendship has developed. But Lindsay's someone that has really grown with the company and demonstrated this ability not just to be inspired by purpose and vision and commitment. All of those things are true, but not just those. But she's evolved and grown and shown this extraordinary potential to adapt to this changing environment and to adapt to new roles. So started in operations, went into the commercial side of the business, head of commercial operations, and now runs that for the entire organisation. And we look forward to a long and continued friendship and collegiate experience with Linz. She's first class.
What a great story. Perfect.
This has been the Closers Club PodSpecs. To learn more about Sonder, the Closers Club, or how to feature on PodSpecs, make sure you follow and subscribe today.